Must have been a pretty scary time going through something to do with the injury or the medical condition you had. I've gone through a few and it was a pretty trying time in my life.
Yeah, I could possibly regard it as devastating because I was struggling with short-term memory, with speech fluency, with neuropathy, nerve pain, inability to walk. I thought I was going to just be a vegetable. I was really fading out.
Good. Okay. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Soulmates and Suitcases. My name is Lisa Brierley, and beside me is my host, Scott Brierley, and my amazing husband. And our podcast, if you have not seen our podcast before, our podcast is a place where we have honest and open conversations about healing and resilience, relationships, mental health, and all those stories that shape us. And today we're very excited to have a special guest. Welcome to Justin McSweeny. Welcome, Justin.
Hi, Lisa and Scott, and hello to the audience. Thank you all so much for opening up this space for all of us.
Fantastic. And you may be listening to us maybe on YouTube, watching on YouTube, or you can also find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and truefans.fm is another space as well. So our guest today, Justin McSweeny, we're very interested in diving deep into this conversation with him because I really think that we have a lot in common in regards to finding growth and sharing growth. And Justin himself, he is a podcast host, and he's the host of IdeaCast. As well, he is a lifelong student of philosophy, psychology, cognitive science, and human development, and having those kind of deep conversations. So we'll start off, Justin, with you telling us a little more about yourself and kind of maybe a little bit about your IdeaCast, and we'll go from there.
Okay, thank you. And the show IdeaCast was born of actually it was born in the crucible of my having a health, I don't want to call it crisis, but it was a health situation that struck me in my early 40s. And it was one of those existential situations where I was sort of on the precipice of not being of sound mind and agency. I had a brain injury. And so you bring up these bigger questions when you're faced with these kind of things. And I always joke that I like to think of it as a master that showed up in my life. Because prior to that, I was doing good things. I was a small business owner, and my wife and I ran a restaurant, a newsstand, and some landscape business. We were just all over the place with that. And but I kind of had a lot of baggage or residual matters from just like all of us, just from childhood and growing up. And so that moment was a kind of a pivot point for me to try to extricate myself both from the physiological issue, but also, that sort of psychical background of being a little angry, a little bitter, a little frustrated. And, that was some of my fuel to run these businesses and be a workaholic, but at the same time, it was not very healthy. So anyway, that all came to a head. And I spent several years recovering and extricating myself from that situation. And in doing that, I became spiritually curious and psychologically and culturally curious, and all of the things that come with, as you said, psychology, philosophy, and cognitive science. I just took to the best of my ability within my bandwidth to understand these things, because I am largely self-taught. I have no formal education, but nonetheless, that shouldn't discourage any of us from being curious and wanting to learn from others who did take that time and effort to move forward through academia. And so that in 2021, I started my podcast, and I met a gal who was a therapist who had ALS, and we were at a meditation conference together. And she was nonverbal at that point, but her partner was with her, and the three of us kind of bonded. And a few months later, she published a book called No Pressure, No Diamonds, which was about her coming to grips with basically, fait accompli. This is your mortality. And it's kind of a heavy book, but I love it because it shows what we go through when we are in crisis, be it a physical ailment or a mental health crisis. And and she lends it again through someone who is a trained therapist, but as well, she was like a Western Buddhist practitioner. So a lot of things coming together to prepare herself to die. And so I had her on. She did the vocoder thing where you can kind of like Stephen Hawking did, where you look at the letters with your eyes and you can write text and so forth. So she did that. She had a vocoder voice that did the first half of the interview with me asking questions that were scripted and sent to her. And then she and her husband came on a Zoom call with me, and she looked glorious and radiant. And it's in my list if anybody's curious, if I've picked curiosity at this point. Had a wonderful conversation. And then she passed away a few months later. And I would highly recommend that book if you're dealing with a health crisis. Not to be a bookseller or anything, but yeah, No Pressure, No Diamonds was a really neat book. That started the journey. And then I had the audacity to reach out to people who are published authors who are in academia. They're professors, or they're in that domain. And so some of them said yes, and I was like, oh, okay. And I'm sure if I went back and listened to those conversations after 5 years, I'd be like, oh God, Justin, why did you ask? You could have asked this question. So anyway, we can't edit our history, but nonetheless, I was spirited, and I went through that. And so I'm in 168 conversations now, and I've got a guy this afternoon who's very intimidating, and I love it. He's a cog-sci professor, also into Buddhism a little bit too. Well, not a little bit, but he blends these things. But anywho, so the rest of the day I'll be trying to formulate decent questions for the guy. So, but just a little bit more about me. Again, serial entrepreneur. I've had several businesses. Semi-retired from that now. I did the opposite thing, and I went to go work for the state of Florida as a bureaucrat kind of thing. So it's how we take a vacation, I suppose. But so that's it. Yeah, other than that, I have my wife and my cat, and just living in Florida and enjoying life as best as possible.
That must have been a pretty scary time going through something to do with the injury or the medical condition you had. I've gone through a few, and it was a pretty trying time in my life.
Yeah, I could possibly regard it as devastating because I was struggling with short-term memory, with speech fluency, with neuropathy, nerve pain, inability to walk. I thought I was going to just be a vegetable. I was really fading out. And I'm not sure that I went to neurologists and doctors and all this kind of stuff, and they didn't really know what was going on. So, but again, here it is. What was that? 2011 is when it started. So wherever we are, 15 years later, I'm doing okay. I came back.
Like looking back, what did that mean for you now?
Oh, like I said, it was a master that showed up, and it brought me a wonderful opportunity to start caring about life, start caring about what might be more important in life, and valuing not me in the egoic sense, but just this vessel that is me, and what I'm doing with this vessel that is, and the cognitive hardware that comes with the vessel that is me. Am I going to leave this world a little better for my efforts to try to be a good human, good person, good neighbor, good friend, good partner, all these other things. And so those were the kind of quality of not just my life, but life in general for humans and other animals. To see, just to check in with yourself and see if you are just doing the best you can. And there's no pressure. You just do the best you can. Put one foot in front of the other, and do what you can to be a decent person in the world.
It's funny you said it earlier. It's like we do the best we can, but then you went, "Oh, if I went back, I could do this.
Yeah, I know.
Do this a little bit better."
Yeah.
That's normal.
We're allowed to be fallible. Yeah, we're allowed. We could be a little critical to ourselves, but right, there's a boundary to all that. You have that's the fine tuning and the dialing that we would want for ourselves and for others, is that we don't overstep our self-criticism or the inner harsh critic or any of those things. But and I kind of have a gallows sense of humor, so if it's self-deprecating or depreciating, I'm okay with that.
You laugh
It's
it
all
off.
all for a laugh. Yeah, it's just
Yeah.
it's just humor. So
You just laugh it off. So you had all these things, this big challenge in 2011. What sort of, like, how was life different after that for you? Like, what did you need to either learn new or relearn or totally take a different direction in order to make either your life I don't know, sustainable or make your life better than it was before?
One revelation that I think I gave to myself or became apparent to me was, again, I was kind of a not a toxic person, but just a curmudgeony, begrudging person, and it was mostly internalized. I probably projected it, I'm sure, but the revelation was that I was kind of addicted to confrontation and tension and drama and blah 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 because I came up in a very confrontational household. I was raised by a single parent, a lot of conflict, a lot of discord and all those other antisocial things, and it was imprinted on me, and it's just was my normal operating system for me. And I never got into fist fights with people, but if somebody started an argument with me, I would wear it to death. I would not let it go. I would not back down 1 inch. And it's surprisingly, I didn't get punched in the face too more, like by people who didn't want to put up with that. But no, it's just that was a part of my nature, and again, the suffering that was wrought, by that condition, and other intervening factors, it just softened me up, and I thought, I recognize it, and that's, I guess, a kind of self-awareness. And I thought, oh God, why, why go through that? Why do that? And there's still a little, that never goes away. There's a little bit in there, but maybe
Yeah.
I've learned to tame the demon a little bit and maybe put some reins on it and, brake and gas, brake and gas. Whereas before it was automatic. It's like if somebody wanted to joust with me, let's go, and just get all, worked up. But now I don't find that attractive at all, and I don't find it a part of a functional, uh, you know, me that interacts with others. I don't see that as being useful or yeah. If somebody's coming at me and they're being a jerk, then I can switch that on and be really, repulsive and vitrolic and maybe match their frequency, And I don't try not to do that either, But I can if it's necessary, I guess. But it's just unappealing. So that was the revelation. I'm rambling, but that was it. It was just like
Yeah.
slow down, realize the reverberance of what you do, how you project into the
Yeah.
world, and how that impacts others, and how that spirals out. So that was to me, that was one of the more meaningful things that I came to realize, is that I do have, as little as it may be, I do have an impact on other people when I interact with them, and that I should be judicious and prudent, or sophrosyne, which is a word I love, to just control oneself, to understand what you're doing when you're interacting with people and relating with people.
Isn't it crazy the amount of energy that we've put into having to be right
Yeah.
when it doesn't really matter? Like it's
No. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's a huge resource burn. And, living in modernity or meta-modernity or wherever we are right now, that's a valuable resource to maintain one's, again, psycho-emotional battery, or psychosocial battery, where we have to give to others. And whether we want to, at work, we have to be polite, or if we're in a friendly social situation, we want to really show up as a wonderful person that's going to, be in good company with others. So yeah, it's a resource, and we have to, especially as we get older. I'm no spring chicken anymore, and so I really, now that I'm fully in the throes of middle age, it's like, do you really want to spend that much? You could go do something fun instead. Yeah.
It's not worth
So,
it. It's not worth it.
no. I think that's why some people, it's, here's a good, for instance, I was watching a thing. It was a British recorded program from 1987. And I think the last name of this very stuffy British intellectual was McGee. He was 57 years old and looked like he was 75. And I'll be 57 in a few months. And I thought, my God, this man is pretty much my age, but from 19. So, but he was born in 1930, and then I just did a quick, history of the world, and so he lived through World War II, and he lived through all the adversity, all the horror of the mid 20th century, and just before the mid 20th century. So I give him a pass. I mean, he lived through a lot, but I also wonder if there's other things going on, like if they didn't evacuate their stress and evacuate these things, these psychic injuries and things like that, that could really physically age the body out. So it's not so much of a claim to anti-aging, but more that we accelerate our aging by just not having a pressure valve to, either go into therapy or find, Tai Chi, Qigong or something like that that you can, or stamp collecting, whatever it is that decompresses you, that you can outlet whatever accumulated stress is going on or from stuff from the deeper past that vexes us and wears us down. So anyway, that's a little.
Actually, it's funny that you bring that up. Like we live in Thailand and I'm involved with a couple of men's groups and there's some gentlemen here that are in like their mid 70s that I think I look as old as.
Oh my
But I
God.
think I look fairly good for my age. And mind you, there's also some people in there, that age bracket that it's like, what did you do to yourself?
Yeah.
And
I actually talked about that whole like releasing of the emotions or the feelings or maybe the past experiences. I actually asked that question today, so I'll get your thoughts on this. On a post, I asked, do blocked emotions cause illness? And so do you see some lead up to that brain injury of yours, that maybe all that past, whatever that is, caught up to you in some way?
I would speculate, but yes, for certain that it was a contributing factor because again, and I don't want to put myself on a scale, but I came from a pretty adverse childhood, conditions and so forth, and the the retention of that and so to speak to learning how we develop ourselves as children or how the world develops with us, helps us develop as children, we it's called introjection. We take in characteristics of others. Initially, if we go back 150,000 years ago, it was so that the tribe elders would keep you as an infant alive, and your parents would like you, and the oxytocin bonding. You wanted to please the caregiver, and this is primitive psychology. But this introjection process continues through our whole lives, and we take on. That's what virality is now with the internet. Like a meme takes off, or everybody's saying the word literally or so when they start a sentence. It's a virality, and so we're introjecting on each other or from each other. And so we take that up in our parents, and we take the good and the bad, wick it all up, store it. And then there's the guy that I'm interviewing later today. He's a predictive processing cognitive science. So it's a calculus that the mind does to palpate the environment to say, this is what I anticipate to be the next thing, and I want to minimize the surprise to lower the entropy of that surprise. So in other words, that you're not expending too much of your energy in a surprisal state. Rather, you're predicting a safer outcome for your next move. And some of us are good at that, and then there's Evil Knievel and stunt people, and pilots that so, it's like we all have our happy space. But so anyway, I'm rambling, but it's just the idea that there's, yes, so much stuff is onboarded, and part of a healthy individuation or development into an adult is to shed some of the psychic baggage that goes along, with the onboarding of the negative. And I don't know who's good at that. I don't know if there's really it's not being taught. Maybe there are some people who can do it better, but a lot of us, I would say, the big part of the bell curve is those of us that bring all of that forward.
Yeah.
And if we can, as adults, when we go to therapists or whatever we do, to healthfully process that, that's a gold star for us when we can do that. But yeah, so to get to a point, the incident that I went through was again like a checklist. It was like saying, okay, do you want to be this vegetable, or do you care enough about yourself to do whatever it takes to heal yourself? And I went through physiological, medical intervention type things to try to detoxify myself, mental space. That's why I was going to meditation conferences when I met the gal that I first interviewed, Terry Dillian, and just trying to, kind of zen my way out of it a little bit. And that helped. Meditation, I meditated for about 12, 13 years in concomitant to this illness. It really made a difference because I would just be very, very calm. In fact, it got to the point where I was externally very, very calm, but I could still feel the tension inside of me. So I stopped meditating for a while to deal with the implicit under the, like unconscious type stuff. And so I'm slowly kind of nibbling away at that. And then maybe I'll get back into mindfulness because I noticed that the waking conscious me was calm and, kind of zenned out. But there was this, and it's just angstiness or tension or whatever. So I'm working on that, and we'll see where we go with that.
Funny how you brought up meditation. I just spent a week or two living with a friend of mine that I think it was 6 years ago now. His wife was, actually, no, it was during COVID, was diagnosed with cancer and basically got told, go home and make plans because you're
Make your
going to be
plans.
dead in 3 months.
Right.
And she got in the car on the way home, and this is what she kind of said to me. She was so mad at the doctors. She was like, F you.
Yeah.
How dare you tell me that?
Yeah.
And she believes she cured herself from meditation.
And she's
Nice.
alive.
And she's got zero it's gone.
Yeah. No, that was part of that. My meditation protocol was that kind of thing where you're sort of taking the reins and doing restorative work and health enabling work. So what the doctor did was basically dictate again, if we're talking about bell curves, like the majority of people are going to swallow the pills, take the chemo, radiation, do whatever. This is a pejorative term, but the allostatic medicine or however whatever allopathic medicine, prescribes, and that's fine, and it's a necessary part of the journey for some, like severe cases and so forth. But then there are people, as in the friend that you mentioned, that can turn things around by, first of all, I would say good, clean, healthy eating, keep the body vessel going with really good diet, clean water, clean food, and then clear out the mental space. Because I interviewed a biologist from Tufts University, and he's a developmental biologist, but one thing he's working on is cancer mitigation, but not in a sort of invasive way. It is more that he's studying cellular communication, and when metastatic cancer occurs, that those cells become not necessarily rogue, but they identify, if they can, as independent living systems inside the body. So therefore, they're not in a synchronous, egalitarian kind of environment, like say the liver. If a few 100,000 or a few million liver cells are in that malignancy, that they don't recognize themselves as liver cells anymore, and they just start eating the environment. And what they're working with calcium ion channel communications and the little bioelectric circuits that are going on is to reprogram those rogue-ish cells to go back to being just happy, healthy liver cells again. So to speak again to your friend, maybe she's biohacking in that sense that, what we are is a system that we could use the cybernetic metaphor where it's like a thermostat on the wall. You want to find your set point, your homeostatic set point, to make sure everything is in proper communication and everything is functioning as the blueprint intended, as the DNA scheme intended, is that you're a liver, do liver things, heart, do heart things, intestines, do intestine things, brains, etc. And so, I'm a firm believer in that. But I think it's also with a lot of conditions, a lot of asterisks at the end, that it's not everybody, like my friend with ALS, she went to that conference to try to see if she could throw a Hail Mary pass to get out of that situation. And that's a heavy hill to climb. And so is a lot of different stage 4 conditions of cancer and other autoimmune conditions like Parkinson's and things like that. But I think it can only help. It can only help. And if you're at a certain level, a certain threshold of disease, I think that's an excellent pursuit, is to do what your friend did.
For sure.
Also, we're not recommending you do this as well. And
No. Listen to your doctor, but at the same time, have that mindset that you are a system that you do have some control. Now, it's, again, a lot of asterisks at the end, disclaimers and cautions. But I think it should be part of a treatment protocol, is that you
100%.
eat clean. Eat clean, be in a good headspace, love yourself above all, and have a supportive community with you. I think that's the other thing. You're not an island like Simon and Garfunkel. You're not a rock. You're not an island. You are in a deeply embedded in a system, and that system, when it's supportive, can make a huge difference for you.
Yeah, it's interesting, the things you just brought up, actually. I'm starting a program tomorrow, and they talk about those things that do help with wellness and what.
Here's a quick pause in the conversation to invite you to join our Facebook community, Soulmates and Suitcases podcast. Tell your story, amplify your voice, where we share upcoming guests, new episodes, and conversations from the podcast. and you can catch all episodes on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Be sure to follow and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Now back to the show.
It's not what to
Okay.
keep in account. Community is one. Supplementation of some sort is another. Nutrition is another. Sleep is another. Water, exercise, silence. There's the one, your meditation, which is really a nice way to put it. Silence. And you had mentioned mindfulness. Someone told me mindfulness, it's mindlessness in some way. So letting nothing happen in the mind instead of filling the mind. But those are sort of the things you're speaking about in regards to wellness. And when you think back of now of the people that you have interviewed on your IdeaCast podcast, who kind of stands out maybe as someone you aligned with really well, and you kind of went, that's what I'm doing in order to live my best life? Like what sort of kind of words of wisdom stands out for you?
One thought that came to mind, one person that came up for me was actually the professor that taught the guy that helped the guy that I'm talking to this afternoon, which is kind of how I linked up. His name's John Vervaeke. He's at the University of Toronto, and this man that I'm speaking to later today is he's actually speaking. He does some lecturing with Monash University in Australia, but he's also, I think, involved with UT in Toronto. And so John Vervaeke is an interesting character. And he's gone, I've been following him for probably 6 or 7 years now. And he had this 50-hour lecture series called Awakening from the Meaning Crisis. And he starts out in the sort of kind of pre-Socratics, and then to Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. He goes through this like history lesson of how we're developing our cultural milieu and how the Western culture is developing itself and building its philosophical canon. And then he moves through the axial age around the time of when Christianity was emerging, and then it was just a couple hundred years before the Common Era, before Common Era thing. But anyway, goes through the Middle Ages into the Scholastic era, up into sort of Western 18th, 19th, and early 20th century thought leaders, philosophers, people who were trying to figure things out. So it starts with Descartes and Kant, Immanuel Kant, and people were building on that work. So he just builds and develops, and then he gets into his cognitive science in the last like 15 to 20 chapters. If you've got 50 hours to kill, and then he did another series called After Socrates, and then he's doing right now something called the Lectern, where he went out on a kind of pilgrimage to go and explore the East a little bit, and then see where the synthesis is, which is something I'm very much interested in, because our Western philosophical canon didn't develop in a vacuum. It was informed a lot by, especially in Persia, which now Iran, but that was a place where a lot of really thinky type people got together in the early, the first 1,000 years of our modern history. Common Era or AD, up to about 1,000. The Silk Road brought a lot of information. So John's working on a lot of these things, and he's trying to develop something that I think in the West, there are a lot of folks who are not necessarily tethered to a particular Abrahamic belief system. They're not into Christianity, Judaism, or Islam so much. They draw from that, and he tends to call them nuns, like NONES, like spiritual but not affiliated, and they're just kind of out there floating and looking, and it's like part of the New Age movement, or any of these different names we could hang on what people are doing, but they're trying to put together what I would call a psychotechnology, where one can develop a practice of a spiritual practice to acquaint oneself with what might be sacred or mystical, or whatever you want to call it, and it's all contained within the natural world. It's not appealing to anything supernatural, which I tend to subscribe to, because if we can imagine it, or if we can even think we can interact with it, I don't think it's supernatural. It's just something, I think it's arrogant to say supernatural, because we're just these primitive systems. And we're cut off from a lot of things. We can't see atoms, so are they supernatural? No, so in fact, we don't know what they look like, but we know, that they do things. So it's that kind of, it's apophasis is another term. It's like, I know, but I don't know, and I don't need to know that I know or know if I know and all this kind of stuff. So there, he's dancing around a lot of it. But what it all revolves around is what the three of us are trying to do, which is understand human well-being and development and growth and flourishing and pro-social living and egalitarian living where we care about other people and we have to maintain ourselves and care for ourselves, but we're also in this sort of network system, a niche construction system with social niche construction with others where they impact us and we impact them and so forth. And we have to respect the environment that we live in because we can kill that will in turn kill us. So, it's all this connection. So John's a neat guy. And again, Vervaeke, I think it's Vervaeke, and interesting fella. You can jump in anywhere you want. You don't have to watch the whole 50-hour thing. He's got dozens and dozens of things out there. So he's one of them. For a while, I had several conversations with a guy named Bernardo Kastrup, who's interesting. He's a computer scientist. In fact, he just developed an AI chip that's going after NVIDIA or whatever. So he's a player out in the European market for the next generation of artificial intelligence, which would be great because then we won't have to build these ugly data centers that suck up a lot of power. They're working on much more efficient technology. But he got his second PhD. He did first was in computer science and stuff, but then he got his second PhD in philosophy, and he's an idealist. So he thinks everything is consciousness, and I don't go that far with him, but that's Advaita Vedanta. It is the Brahman. It is, it's synthesis of East and West, and he's a Dutch Portuguese or a Dutch, Brazilian or Portuguese guy. So anyway, I had him on for several hours and had some really neat conversations with him, and so he's a gadfly to kind of popular what's called physicalism or monist materialism, where you have people who are mostly embedded in science and STEM and physics and chemistry, and they think that everything is particles and everything's dead and inert, and that consciousness, don't worry about it, and so I don't go as far as Bernardo does, but I also want to support him because that metaphysical materialist monism rubs me the wrong way because and I'm not a deeply spiritual person, but to say that everything is dead and good luck and it's all an illusion or it's all hallucination and you don't know there's nothing going on, that's so tedious and dead. It's like we are living systems, right? And we are imbued with this intelligence and this curiosity, and we need those things. Even if there aren't supernatural things going on, that mythopoetic system that we generate for ourselves, like religions, they're social engineering, and they are the lattice and the architecture for our having a sense of spiritual outlet and fulfillment. And I think that is critical for humanity. Whatever you believe in, you could believe in whatever, but I think that's an inherent, I call it will to spirit. It's just this inherent part of ourselves. So it doesn't matter what any of us think, it's that we have this commonality. And if we can respect each other's space for that and not argue over whose God is going to win the boxing match, it's like just find the commonality, find that common ground with whomever, is claiming to be of a spiritual nature or theistic nature or whatever that would be. So those are two people, and there's a whole raft of other people, but those were the two that I probably invested a lot of time in.
It's funny how close we're connected, and I was in way denial about this for years, but the same lady that I was talking about that had cancer, I'm staying in her house. I'm up in a bedroom on the other side of the house having a nap, and I wake up and I'm thinking, where can I go buy a good date square? I go downstairs, sit down on the couch and start talking to her. She goes, I'm thinking about making date squares. And I'm like, really?
Yeah.
I said, 2 minutes ago, just before I came down here, when I woke up, I was thinking where I could go buy a date square.
You had a few things happen.
And then there was one in a different place I was staying at. I literally woke up.
I wasn't there, by the way.
Lisa wasn't there, and I had my hand here, and I felt her hand. I felt her presence, and then I almost said, "Hey, babe," and that's when I kind of realized she really wasn't there.
And
wow.
The dog.
Oh, I've seen my dog all over the place, but I think that's just because I'm so used to him being everywhere. But
or is it?
Or is it? Yeah.
It just how tuned in. And do you find you are more tuned in, I will say, since 2015, was it? 2011.
Uh, yeah, I have some intuitive acuity, maybe, or intuitive
Awareness.
capacity. Yeah, awareness. And I tend to be a party pooper in the sense that, so I'm not one of those physicalist monists that thinks, everything's dead and forget about it. Just,
Yeah.
have a good life, party till you die, that kind of thing. I like to think of, what do we have access to? What do we have an apprehension of? What do we feel confident about talking about? And so for things like that, and yeah, there's been instances in my life and I'm like, ooh, that's uncanny. That's really interesting. Yeah. And anyway, what I like to think of is that when we move frame by frame by frame into the future, everything is probabilistic. So this kind of almost goes into the whole quantum thing where things are, constantly coalescing into solidity or, thisness, the reality that we experience. So that probabilistic nature, given the processing power of our minds and the mind is nothing more than that, which has been wrought by nature, which, if you want to go down to the ontological primitive of what the universe is doing or reality is doing, is it's an energy information matrix. It is energy is very crudely, colloquially said, material things are made of a very slowed, low hertz rate energy, and which is the coalescence of atoms into molecules, into chemistry, into it's a complexification almost on an upscale, but that when we come down to it, it's there's information embedded in all. I read something 2 days ago that blew my mind. That I just Googled, like, how many bits of information are stored in an atom, and so the query came back and asked, well, are you talking about a computational atom that we work with in computers, or are you talking about a physics atom? And so it gave both descriptions, and it said that the bit of information that we send, like right now on our computers, that go up to bytes, which is 8 bits, and then to petabytes and all these other things, it takes 1 million or so atoms to be a constituent of 1 bit of information that we send back and forth to each other. Then when you go to the physics side, that one atom contains 10 to the 24 bits of information. So it's a real weird inverse scale, which is why I was joking about data centers earlier. The human mind only uses 20 watts of energy, and this AI future that we're building needs, bazillions of gigawatts and bazillions of petabytes of information just to sort of emulate what this little 20 watts, there's 60 watts between us, it's a light bulb, but we're having a we're having a very dynamic conversation, right? But, our tech friends are out there, plodding away, trying to get Claude and ChatGPT to, and it's not to besmirch AI or the machine learning or anything, because those systems can find novelty in abstract random information. They can pull things out that we would never have done. So we kind of need each other now that we've brought the Promethean fire to ourselves with machine learning, et cetera, et cetera. Give an editorial comment. I would much prefer it stays in STEM and science and engineering, chemistry, and medicine for a while, instead of just becoming, chatbots and parasocial, para-emotional things that we interact with as just normal folks. Anyway, editorial's over. But so information. I'm going on this long-winded tangent. Thank you for permitting this. But yeah, just where we find ourselves as these psychic beings, and I say psychic not like the crystal ball, but more just psychological systems. We have very powerful capacities in our mindedness, and that's why I believe that we can be premonitive, or we can, do whatever these things are that we do. Predictive, which is premonitive. We can see things or intuit things. I'm wide open to that. I'm agnostic, but I'm wide open because we just don't know. It's just like the supernatural. It's just because we don't know, or we don't have access to it.
Yeah.
I can relate with the agnostic part. However, I have this shelf up here that when I have a problem, or if I want somebody to get looked after, I put them up on the shelf. Because it's in the universe, and it's like, and I know the universe rocks, and there was a time I thought the universe hated me. And the life that I ended up living, it's like the universe was just molding me for the life this life that I have today. And, but I also think it's like all the stuff we're talking about tonight. And I think back, I think we're relatively the same age. And it's like, could you imagine as a kid that you would have been shot if you had said, well, in the future, I'm going to be talking to somebody on a Zoom call.
On a computer.
On a computer.
About growth and life.
But then now we're talking AI, where AI is going to be running the Zoom call pretty soon.
Right. Yeah, no, things are accelerating very quickly. And again, there's something called Moloch's dilemma, and Moloch was a Hebrew demon that demanded a sacrifice for anything good. You wanted something, you had to pay in ways that you may not expect. And so AI is a Malachian dilemma that we're creating for ourselves. Because again, I think it has so much potential. That's why I would love to see it firewalled into STEM, into engineering, into chemistry, into medicine, whatever they need that high computational power for. Let it mature there, and let the learning curve go on there, where people who can control what's going on much better, rather than it being turned out into the public, where it's our chatbot, which is our para-emotional companion, where we develop relationships that are asymmetrical. It's just ones and zeros, and we are emotive, affective creatures, and we're very sensitive. And so I just think that's a mismatch right now. Now, if it can be refined and they can do research, in fact, I'm reading an article from the guy I'm talking to this afternoon, and he's talking about a kinder approach to that, where we can harness some of that and use it to developmental ways with how we function, with how we interact with the world. And so those are the kind of cautious and prudent things that I like to see, because we shouldn't be afraid of it. We shouldn't resist it so much, but we also need to know that it could be fraught with peril. And I'm not one of the people who think the singularity and it's going to take over and be Skynet and we're going to have Terminators running. I don't know, that's silly. I mean, we can just figure out how to burn it all down if we need to. But yeah, we have an interesting future ahead of us, and we're kind of, again, we're close in the same Gen X or whatever you want to call it. And so I am very deeply concerned for Gen A, Gen B, and Gen Z and folks like that, anybody under 25, 30, that they are emerging, they are going to be coming into this world, and they don't know what it was like in the 70s or the 80s, and to live prior to. So we're not digital natives necessarily. They are, and they don't know another reality, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of a reality. So I am concerned for that, and I would love to see a renaissance of this. Like there's the cliche: go touch the grass, go forest bathe, go and it's real. I think if they can integrate the two things, I think that would be wise. Our children.
I agree.
We just did a podcast with a gentleman last night. I can't remember the exact title of him, but he lives in Taiwan.
Oh, he's a voice analysis.
Voice analysis. And there are actually countries that are starting to voice analysis be doctor, like diagnose you. Mm-hmm. And it's getting to the point where some of these countries that they're even saying that you'll have a cold in a couple days. And people are getting
from your voice.
From your voice.
Yes.
And they can pick up cancer, and they can pick up pre-cancer and all that stuff. And hopefully eventually stuff like that takes off in the Western world, because I know in the Western world we have our heels in the ground of any new stuff. We don't like touching it. And
Yeah. They have dogs that can sniff cancer. They run a dog around somebody. Yeah. So the fact that a voice could sort of betray things that are way more subtle than any human ear could detect. That's cool. Yeah, I mean, again, there's so much goodness that could be brought about. And and in the United States, not to sound too cynical, but everything's market driven. So it's like, how does the venture capitalists and the hedge fund people, they steer the ship a lot of times. And so other places in the world might actually end up leading the way on these more altruistic and beneficial applications of these emerging technologies, or meta technologies, or agglomerated technologies, or whatever machine learning is going to end up being. But as long as somebody's getting the benefit.
Yeah, exactly. Now I'm a teacher, Justin,
Okay.
I'm a teacher, and I can tell just from your level of curiosity that, as an adult, you get to explore all these, different people, and you get to ask them questions and learn and take it all in. I'm really curious, Justin, what was your schooling like as a child? And do you have any recommendations for schools out there? Because there are
Oh,
many different learners.
yeah, yeah. I'll qualify what I'm about to say by saying that I don't think I am qualified to speak to education, which is a type of learning. Obviously, it's a constructed and tried and true method of helping pedagogy influence young minds. But I was a hot mess as a student, as a child, because I was they called it dyslexia. I think I have probably ADD or ADHD too, but probably some species of that maybe. But yeah, I had learning disabilities as a child. So up until about the sixth, seventh grade, they didn't know they thought I was an idiot or I was lazy or whatever. They gave me an IQ test and it came back, honky dory. And so they sent me to a school shrink, and the shrink, was asking me some questions, and they just finally realized, that I did have learning disabilities, and they were actually going to send me to a school at the University of Southern Illinois that had a program, probably with their post grad kids working on learning disability children to learn and develop. So I was going to be a guinea pig that would be a student that would learn and probably but never really manifested. And so I just stayed in I went to Catholic school for a little while, and then I went to public school back and forth. Parents got divorced, and that kind of threw a wrench in it. So to get to high school, if I liked the class, if it was interesting to me, I would do okay in it. I would get B's or A's. If I didn't like it, and math was a weak link for me, so I didn't do well at all with math, which is kind of a shame. I do appreciate, and I could do basic math, but I mean, I just love to get into more abstract things like calculus and geometry and things like that. But it was just a struggle, and I had to, be efficient and focus my attention. So I love writing and language and English and some science, like I love biology and things, which is strange because it involves math. But so if I took a liking to it, and then what was interesting, and this was part of that sort of nihilistic aspect of who I was I felt a lot of shame and guilt for not having done better in school, and then for not going straight to a 4-year school afterwards and getting a degree in something. Although in high school I went to work in kitchens and I became a cook, and then after high school I went to a restaurant that was French Escoffier cuisine with a lot of good chefs, and so I learned basically I got a culinary education in a couple of years of working there and picked up a lot of good skill sets. And I was a chef for 20 years. I owned a restaurant prior to getting out of it. So, it did okay for me. But I went through a period from 18 to 22 or 3 where I just felt I let myself down, and that I was feeling really guilty, not so much for pleasing parents or looking good to the status quo, my friends and peers. It was more that I just felt like I let myself down. But then I forgave that and moved on. And now that I'm middle-aged or older, I just love learning for learning's sake. I cannot stop. It's part of that obsessive ADHD personality I have. I just go and I never let up, and I just want to keep wicking things up and meshing and making threads of tapestries of threads of ideas, and seeing what that tapestry looks like, to milk a metaphor. So yeah, that's how I think I came into my own, was just give myself some space and then learn what I can. I even try to look at equations and hard math and stuff sometimes to see what they're doing, just to tease it a little bit. So to speak to the audience, if there's somebody out there that's struggling or has struggled and they're in that sort of guilt phase, it passes. And love and accept yourself for whoever you are. Do the best you can. I went the self-employment route rather than trying to, I could have kept going as a chef, but I decided that I was making probably more money. So I was a chef and I worked in the daytime. I was like a workaholic. And so I worked in the evening as a chef. And then in the daytime, I would do landscaping, because in Florida, you can do landscaping year round. And so I had a little side hustle, and that actually started making 30 years ago, I was probably making 40,000 a year as a chef, and then I was making another 25, 30,000 a year as a landscaper. And so I said, well, the hell with it. I'm only working 10 hours a week, making 30,000 a year, whatever the calculus was. And I'm like, I'm jumping into landscaping. But then everything scales up, like the operating costs. But anyway, I did okay as a landscaper. Then I opened a restaurant, and then I opened up after selling the restaurant to someone, I went back into landscaping again. And because I knew the form, I knew how to run it. And my wife and I did that for years. We just got out about 3 years ago. So anyway, there's ways to do workarounds if you don't go the orthodox route and the conventional route. But the way education was set up in the 70s and the early 80s, it just didn't jive with me. So it's unfortunate. But I think there's been inroads and strides made for folks that are bright, but they're just not learning the conventional way. And I really hope that goes on a continuum, that people can they can be helped as being recognized.
Yeah, there definitely is more personalized learning. However, it is challenging. I don't know, I've never worked in the States. Just in Canada is what I'm speaking of. There's more personalized learning, although, and more choices in schooling, which is really good.
Okay.
Yeah. And you talk about, you had your brain injury later in life. Like Scott had major brain injury at the age of 7. So like when you talk about, the changes and the shifts and those sort of things in your life and how you're supported. I mean, even since Scott's brain injury, like that's 50 years ago now, how much we've learned and now understand about the brain and the impacts to the brain and how that affects learning and social skills and coping skills and just so many areas. And have you yourself, Justin, experienced like all of that with brain injury, or not quite to that extent?
Well, so kind of a funny, not funny story. When I was a kid, I was really accident prone, and I had TBIs as a kid. And they would take me to different hospitals because they were worried that if they kept bringing me in every 2 to 3 weeks with another either major head trauma or a gash or some grievous bodily injury, they thought that they'd be turned into the Children and Family Services. Yeah.
My dad was at the hospital, actually called the cops on my dad to question him about abuse.
Yeah, they did. They were like, "Oh, I can't go to Silver Spring anymore. We got to go over to Tacoma Park or whatever." So yeah, so they did that. But and also to speak to those who have dealt with child abuse or worse, that affects the brain too.
Yeah.
That the trauma at a young age really has, from what I've read, has an influence on that. So yeah, you got your organic physiological injuries. You've got adversity or trauma or abuse, and these are all things weighing against us and really potentially holding us back. And so to know the fluid nature of cognitive development, brain development is essential. And I'm so sorry for anyone who lived prior to kind of like after 1980 or 70 or whatever the timeline is, because they would just throw you in a nut house, or they would call you a simpleton. There was these very basic broad things and it was none of them were good options. Or people turned out to be sociopathic manipulators or killers or whatever because they didn't get interventions. And so I think if we are a more vigilant society, that we can recognize and offer intervention early and help that. But to go to what you had asked me, I think part of the learning disabilities was perhaps some of the couple of knocks I took to the head, plus the dysfunctional family Olympics and the weird psychodrama stuff that would go on there, and the violence in the home and all that. That has a modulating effect, I think, on development. And so that was probably, in fact, I've read that dyslexic children are children that are most likely exposed to something, whatever the traumatic event is. And people could check that, but I want to say I read that somewhere that seems to be maybe beyond genetic predisposition or biological profile, that can have an influence, I guess, on people developing that, or even ADHD. So, that's worth checking into if someone's listening and they're trying to put pieces of the puzzle together. But for myself, I was sort of ignorant of the sort of causal history and the chain and all the things that could lead up to a particular thing. Now, as an adult with the capacity to retrospect, it I think makes a huge difference. But like I said, if you can catch it, recognize it, and don't self-adjudicate, don't criticize, don't you know, I went into some serious nihilistic loathing behavior, not just not good. And that's like, again, when I was 41, had that last, it was either a mold sickness, or I have Hashimoto's with the thyroid, and there's something called Hashimoto's encephalopathy that I might have had, because I looked at the manifestations of that and I was like, oh yeah, that ticks most of the boxes, like for all the crap that I was dealing with. So who knows what happened to me. But again, at this place that I'm at now, I can visit the childhood me that had, this, that, and the other, and follow his development line and say, okay, I can be very forgiving to myself and very understanding of my history and so forth. And I think that's a great gift that somebody can give to themselves, is to know their history, even that, which could be obfuscated, because sometimes when people are traumatized, they depersonalize, and it just gets blocked out. They don't remember that incident or the sets of incidents. So that can be a mystery, right? Like, why am I this way? And well, you don't remember that, abuse or whatever trauma that might have happened. But that speaks again to wellness practice and being in a caring community, being with voices that can hear you and speak to you and commiserate and enter into reciprocity with you and say, yes, you're not alone. And here's some insights that I gained from both my own experience and from sharing with others, et cetera. So yeah, there's ways that we can maintain ourselves and then just develop ourselves.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
podcasts like ours and like yours, it brings.
Final pause. If you've got a message on your heart and want to be our guest, don't be shy. We'd love to hear from you. Visit forwardwalkingchoices.com, scroll to the Soulmates and Suitcases podcast section, and click apply here. Now back to the show.
It brings light to other people's stories, and really in the end, that's what we have, is our own story and our own story to share. And whoever hears this today, this podcast, they're meant to hear, they're meant to connect in some way, or maybe get a little light bulb moment. And that, to me, that's what counts, and that's what's important. And we all, I mean, I taught this as, a grade 1 student, like grade 1 kids, that we all are unique. I know it sounds very cliche, I guess. We all are unique, but we all are the same.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
kind
yeah.
of goes back to that, we're all energy. We are all energy. We all bleed the same blood, and
Yeah.
we all need the same stuff to survive in many ways, air, water, food, that sort of thing.
Right.
So yeah.
Right. I think one soapbox issue that I like to toot my horn on, or toot a bullhorn to, is to say that in the West, European background countries, is we struggle with what seems like a dichotomy, right? To be an individual, but to be a member of a group. There's a lot of things that in the West I think Eastern traditions, not to stereotype, but they are better at seeming paradox, and understanding that two things can be true at the same time, or that something that seems deeply dichotomous has a throughway, like a line through it, like a dipole kind of thing. And that if we can, rather than keeping that sort of seeming schism between this and this on the polarity, is that we find that throughway, or find a means of oscillation, a capacity to move, to then in context understand things from a different perspective, or yada yada. But that is a skill set that we in the West could benefit from, because I think, again, we tend to find polarity without the throughway, and so that would be, if you want to develop a mental muscle, just like Buddhist koans are meant to develop that for the monks. They are given something that, one hand clapping, or whatever, and you're supposed to meditate on that, or contemplate on that, and so that helps break that capacity, which probably, when we come back to some primitive psychology or cognitive science, it's what we had to do to survive. Like, tiger in grass, run. It's not like, well, maybe this is the one tiger in a billion that actually wants to be my friend. No, go. So it's inherent probably, but I think other cultures have managed to integrate that into the developmental, individuation process, the coming of age and all that kind of thing. So anyway, it's just a suggestion that holding a paradox, and we're terrible about that. I'll pick on the United States, by golly, like our cultural political thing is so fractured and so, just vile right now, and it's because people have been herded into these camps and they think that, it's do or die. And how dare you want me to, integrate and find a synthesis or, and it's like, no, that's how we were. That's what evolution, our relationship with adaptation and evolution, we were social creatures and we survived by the fact that we all looked out for each other. And it's not this thing where we have to be sorted into these little silly arbitrary camps and things like that. Sorry, more soapboxing, but it speaks to a broader thing where if you can develop that as a mental muscle, it'll benefit you both personally and extra personally, in the interpersonal world.
Exactly. And we'll start to wrap up with maybe this reminder that we are all worth living our best life, whatever that looks like for you. And whatever success looks like for you as well, that's important as well, however you define success and moving forward and growing. So I'm really excited for our audience to take a peek at your podcast as well. So where can, possible future guests for you get a hold of you as well, Justin?
Okay, thank you for asking that, Lisa. I appreciate it. And I'll say firstly that I derive no revenue from this. So when I shill for myself, it is strictly because this is a public service, of lack of better terms. I just bring people in and give them a platform, albeit a small one. So YouTube, IdeaCast interview series. And then I'm also on Spotify, and I think it's the same thing. I think it's just IdeaCast interview series. So a simple Google query or whoever else, Bing or whatever you're using, if you do IdeaCast interview series, there's a financial, not Merrill Lynch, but some financial thing has IdeaCast as well. But I don't know if they're still doing them. But they were old podcasts. But maybe they still do. I don't know. But they're IdeaCast as well. But I'm interview series, and so that would help distinguish it. So and again, 168 conversations. I'm going to upload one today, and I'm recording one today. So going to be 170 by next week. And I've got more guests in the pipeline. And again, the if I were to thumbnail or elevator pitch this show, it is just about discovering persons who are interested in developing human flourishing, human well-being, extricating ourselves from whatever mires we find ourselves in, whatever stress. Life is stressful. Like to keep bringing up Buddhism, life is suffering. But how do we take control of how much suffering is going on? There's some things that are beyond our control, like our aging process, accidents, things happening. But there's also a thing that we can grasp, and that is our relations with others. And that's part of the Eightfold Path, is right relation. And if you can, there's a lot of wisdom in that. If you can find your spot and occupy it as best you can, you're doing good for yourself.
Exactly it. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you so much,
Justin. We appreciate your time, your thoughts, your wisdom, and we congratulate you on all of those podcasts. That's a lot of conversations. And for those who have enjoyed our conversation today, we want to make sure that they leave a comment, leave a review, maybe ask you a question underneath the show as well, as well, make sure to subscribe to our channels and get notifications. That's important. It's very important.
That's right.
Well. So we'll say thank you again, Justin. And because we're in Thailand, we'll say thank you in the Thailand way. We'll say
Kapun Krap.
Kapun Ka. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for the space and the voice, the voices. Yeah, Lisa and Scott, thank you so much. And to the audience, thank you very much too.
Appreciate it. Thanks so much, Justin. Bye-bye. Good night.
Of course. All right. Take care.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
For more inspiration around healing, love, growth, and possibility, you can explore our books at payhip.com/Lisa Scott Brearley Authors. And if today's episode meant something to you, We'd love for you to follow the podcast, share it with someone you care about, or join our Soulmates and Suitcases community online. Thanks for being here, and we'll see you next time.